Oh, that's an interesting way of looking at it.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest edition of the press conference review. I've come in out of the cold, hopefully to try and stop the pesky wind getting involved, but also because, it's always nice to be in here, isn't it? Give you an idea of what it's like to be the manager, have some people asking questions, etc, etc. I can see people out there in the crowd, you can't see them, but they're there. Anyway, enough about me. Let's ask Arne Slot exactly what he had to say ahead of this game against Leeds United. And the first thing we always have to mention is the team news. There was no new injuries from the game against Sunderland, although we did hear that Joe Gomez had been dealing with something, but it wasn't enough to keep him out of the starting lineup. Either way, Conor Bradley has been expected to train today. We'll have to wait and see exactly if he does, but that puts him back into contention for this game against Leeds. Whether or not he comes straight into the squad from the start, or whether or not he ends up on the bench, we are not sure as yet. But by all accounts, it does sound like Joe Gomez is still available if Conor Bradley is not. The interesting part of all of this is the effect that have on Mo Salah, because we heard at the last press conference, Arne Slot feels like Joe Gomez's good play is a lot down to the fact that he has Dominic Szoboszlai ahead of him as opposed to Mo Salah. We did see the two of them play together for a little period against Sunderland, but then Dominic Szoboszlai did go back into right back once Joe Gomez went off. So maybe Slot is reluctant to unleash Gomez and Salah together for a whole 90 minutes. So if Gomez does start, maybe that means Salah doesn't. We have seen Bradley and Salah play well together, so maybe that is the combination that Slot looks to for Leeds United. Again, we aren't sure yet. Training today will probably tell us a little bit more, and we'll have to wait and see exactly what turns up on Saturday afternoon in Leeds. But let's get into the top takeaways, shall we? Top takeaway number one, top four is still the minimum requirement for this Liverpool side. Arne Slot was asked about his expectations and whether or not they have changed at any point since the start of the season, and there's been a lot of discussion in the fan base amongst this as well about whether these results and Liverpool's current malaise have meant that everyone needs to start lowering their expectations. Slot did seem happier about getting the draw against Sunderland than a lot of other people, so maybe internally there have been discussions around whether top four is now the ceiling rather than the bare minimum, but Slot batted those things away. He said it's the first objective, not the only objective, which means to say that Liverpool are still believing that they can get higher than just into the top four. That is an acknowledgement, I guess, of the quality that still remains within this squad. So many of them were still the players who won the league last season, and so many of the new players coming in do have quality once it clicks. But I think it's also an acknowledgement of the fact that not very many other teams are perfect. If you look at the fact that Liverpool is still only 5 points away from third place, 2 points away from fourth place, and this malaise of Liverpool's has been going on for quite some time. So they are not cut adrift as yet. There is still time to recover. And I think that, as much as any kind of positives you take from what Liverpool are doing, is probably the biggest asset in terms of being able to get to the end of the season and salvaging something. The Champions League is a completely different beast all of its own. Liverpool will hope that they can get into that top 8, and then that means that by the time the knockouts come around, they may have recovered some form a little bit. Once you get into knockout football, anything is possible. There is still obviously the FA Cup, which may well be slightly less undervalued this season considering what everything else has happened, but from Liverpool's perspective, in terms of the league, in terms of their bread and butter, it's not top four or nothing. There is still potential for more. Top takeaway number two, Arne is working hard on Project Alex. Now, he was asked about Alexander Isak and about getting him more involved in the game, and he did not shy away from the fact that he hasn't been involved as much as he would like. He did give context and said that most strikers at the moment aren't necessarily involved in the game all the time. I think if you think of Liverpool context, the days of Bobby Firmino coming short and being involved in build-up play and then spinning and still being able to be involved at the sharp end of the pitch, they seem to have gone. If you look at a lot of the strikers across the league, Erling Haaland was referenced by Arne Slot, they aren't involved a lot, but when they are involved, they are normally scoring goals. And if you can get it so Isak's touches aren't necessarily massive, but they are decisive, And I think most people would be okay with that. But Slot was very aware of the fact that his touches are down from his time in Newcastle. Clearly, this is something that he and his coaches have been looking at, and they are trying to find a way to get him more involved. So it isn't where they want to be right now, but it's definitely something they are working on, which is good news. I wonder how much of that will involve the players around him and trying to maybe coach some of those to getting the best out of Alexander Isak in terms of how they play. I think we saw against West Ham, particularly Joe Gomez going out on the overlap and cutting balls back. Most of the time when balls were being crossed into the box, Isak wasn't necessarily running across the 6-yard box. He was pulling back towards the penalty spot. That seems to be where he was most comfortable. So maybe just a bit more of an understanding of things like that, and maybe getting players in those positions who are comfortable doing those things. We mentioned before with Mo Salah and with Cody Gakpo, they are more cut inside kind of players. So maybe either through instruction or maybe even through having different players in those positions, Liverpool look to do things that are a little bit more what Alexander Isak is used to. Maybe that's the key to getting him more involved. But fear not, Arne's on the case. Top takeaway number 3, this team is still struggling for balance. When answering that Alexander Isak question, Arne Slot mentioned the fact that in the last couple of games his side have been a lot more compact, and that has had a detrimental effect on being able to create more chances. And I do think that you look at the attacking play from the last 2 games, it hasn't necessarily been its sharpest, it's been quite stodgy. And as I said, Arne Slot feels like the fact that they were prioritising not conceding had a big effect on that element. And when you've just conceded 10 goals in 3 games, it's kind of understandable. But when you're playing at home to Sunderland and away to West Ham, you think, well, maybe you should be in a position where you can do both. Maybe it shouldn't be an either-or situation. You should be good enough to keep them out and also still impose yourself on them from an attacking perspective. But again, that is the reality of the side at the moment. Blanket theory, Rafa Benitez's blanket theory seems to be in effect here as well, in terms of when you improve one side of the game, you seem to be taken away from the other. Rather than it balance, it seems like a bit of a seesaw at the moment, so they can't both be good at the same time. Now, again, like I said, this is an indication of where Liverpool are as a team, but if they want to achieve their objectives, this is something that's going to have to be sorted out and sharpish. They cannot afford to be reactive as they have been in terms of, well, we've had some games where we conceded a load of goals, let's just not concede goals. We need to be able to be in a position where we can achieve all objectives at the same time. And until that's the case, Liverpool are still going to be 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. I asked Arne Slot about Cody Gakpo and the competition for his place. This is what he had to say. Hi Arne, I wanted to ask you about Cody Gakpo. I mean, if you think back to last season, when he was at his best, he was in a fierce battle for his place with Luis Diaz. And even when they lined up together, there was the chance that one of the other strikers would come on and Luis Diaz would go out to the left. I think if you look in Premier League and Champions League last season, Cody played the full 90 only 6 times, whereas already this season he's played 10 times. We haven't seen a lot of Rio and Gamora in recent weeks in those competitions, and we haven't seen Hugo Ekitike tried off the left, as we've heard that may well be an option. Do you think Cody's maybe suffering a little bit from not having that razor-sharp competition for his starting place?
Oh, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Because you can also look at it in a way, if a player plays a lot, this gives him consistency, self-confidence. Usually, if I talk to players that I don't play every single time, it's mostly their answer is, yeah, but I need to play every single minute. That gives me more confidence and I can bring the most out of myself. And now you say the opposite. So the reason why I haven't tried Hugo a lot of times off the left is an obvious one, because of the Alexander Isak situation, that he's either not been available or not been available to start every single game. And Rio has had his minutes, but I think for a 17-year-old, he's already had much more minutes than any other 17-year-old at any other club in the Premier League. So that's positive for him, and I think I don't think Cody suffers from the fact that he doesn't have competition, because there are players that can play in his position. And usually, like I just said, players prefer to have a situation where they have the confidence and the understanding that that they might play many minutes.
Not for the first time when answering one of my questions, Arne Slot kind of flipped the premise a little bit. Now, obviously, my premise was the fact that Gakpo played better when he had competition for his place, where Slot said that players are telling him that they feel better when they are consistently playing games week in and week out, and that allows them to build up their form and their fitness and feel better in themselves. Now, this is probably very true. Obviously, he's there in the coach's dressing room, so he understands what they're telling him. But my feeling is also, well, a player's going to say that, isn't he? A player's going to say, I feel great when I know that you're playing me every week. A player's not going to say, oh no, it's fine, get that other guy in to take my place. I'm happy with that. But the evidence doesn't always back up what they say. So I would be maybe slightly cautious around taking the player's word for it. I think the numbers speak for themselves. The point I made about the fact that Cody Gakpo has played full 90s on 10 occasions already, which is almost twice as many as he did for the entirety of last season in the Champions League and in the Premier League, suggests that he really doesn't have any competition, and that Arne Slot is reluctant to use anyone else, which I do think is starting to have an effect. We did see in the Sunderland game where he did take him off at half-time, and he wasn't afraid to say in the post-match press conference that it felt like Gakpo wasn't doing what he was put on the pitch to do. He wasn't winning his 1v1s. He wasn't affecting the game as he would like. And it was Florian Wirtz who came on in that situation. I wanted to get an answer from him as well about the Hugo Ekitike on the left situation, because there was lots of talk about that as being an option in the summer when he arrived, and we've seen no hints of it whatsoever. So it was good to get an answer on that. The answer that came, I thought, was fascinating, because he mentioned that it was the fact that Alexander Isak hasn't necessarily been a full fitness, and that is what stopped him from trialling Hugo Ekitike out there on the left, which in some context does make sense, but it's another one of those situations where you feel like Hugo is the side character in the Alexander Isak story, which isn't really fair on Hugo Ekitike, and I think it's starting to affect him. If you think about the way that Hugo started the season, I think it was 6 goals in his first 12 games. At that point, he was the striker. Isak wasn't available. He was the main guy. He was taking all of that pressure on his shoulders, and he was thriving from it. Now he's become a secondary character, an afterthought almost. It's no goals in his last 8 appearances. I think maybe prioritising Hugo, finding a way to get him back in that starting lineup and saying, look, I do think you can do a job for me. I do think you can be a threatening player in this team, might end up bringing some of that confidence back. Maybe it's a balance between competition and a bit of selection time. We'll have to wait and see how it all works out for this game against Leeds United, but it will be another tough test. There is no doubt about that. One that I will be very personally keen to make sure Liverpool win, because I'm not sure if you're aware, my sister's a Leeds fan, and you guys, I just can't. But anyway, enough about me. I'm not sure yet if I will be at Ellen Road. The accreditation has yet to come through, so I may be at Ellen Road, in which case you will be getting a match report as well. If not, I'll be watching it at home, just like every one of you, and I'm going to hope that we see a better Liverpool than we've seen in the last few months and weeks. I will be around on the Late Challenge on Monday. I will be putting out a new column for This Is Anfield in future. Those of you who are in the USA will know that I'm coming to Philadelphia in a couple of weeks, so keep an eye out for that if you are in the Philadelphia area. But until now, I'll be back on Monday. See you soon.